people are still coming out with Pirkei Avot commentaries. While I was working on it, I think there's also a Yitzhak Greenberg one that came out, or a Koren one that came out. So I just think it's a really interesting phenomenon to see that making new Pirkei Avot is like a trend in Jewish literary world at the moment.
This is the Book of Life. I'm Heidi Rabinowitz. Before we hear today's interview, I want to thank you all for the voicemails you've left me saying nice things about the Book of Life. You'll hear those messages mixed with clips from the episodes they refer to in our grand finale episode later in December 2017. I also want to let you know that I may post random episodes of the Book of Life now and then in the coming year if I stumble across something just too interesting to resist podcasting about. So don't unsubscribe. Now let's hear a group interview with Jessica Deutsch, creator of the graphic novel The Illustrated Pirkei Avot, and with Lois Shenker and Rabbi Eve Posen, co-authors of Pirkei Imahot, The Wisdom of Mothers, The Voices of Women. Let's go around the virtual table and everyone introduce yourself and tell us about your book.
Hey everyone, I'm Jess, and I recently came out with The Illustrated Pirkei Avot, a graphic novel of Jewish ethics. It's intended to be a really fun entryway for people to learn Mishnah, and also for longtime lovers of Torah study to give them a fresh approach of what Mishnah could look like in 2017.
This is Lois Shenker. I'm co-author of Pirkei Imahot with Rabbi Eve Posen, and our book is a modern-day interpretation of Pirkei Avot from the eyes of contemporary Jewish women, and it includes words of wisdom from Jewish women all over our country, trying to pass on those tidbits we got from our own mothers, our grandmothers, our teachers, our friends, our neighbors, because we wanted to be sure that there was a contemporary view of that wisdom.
I'm Rabbi Eve Posen. I am the assistant rabbi at Congregation Neve Shalom in Portland, Oregon. And I just would add to what Lois said about our book. One of the things that makes our book so modern and so user-friendly today is that each section has questions for your own reflection, so you can add your individual response to the text, just like Rashi did when they were going through the first place, Mishnah and Talmud. So it really also allows you to add your voice to the conversation as well.
And we put in blank pages all the way throughout the book, not just at the end for a study section. There's a place right there to write it.
Very cool. Let's start by defining the Pirkei Avot and explaining where it comes from, how it came to be. Rabbi.
Pirkei Avot is part of the Mishnah, the Tractate of Nezikin, which is damages, and it's from around 200, 250 CE, and it's basically words of wisdom or words to live by that the rabbis used to share with each other, with their community, and it became an ethical will of sort to say, here's the things that you should live your life by. Don't separate from the community. More women, more witchcraft apparently was important to them. Sayings about what it means to jump into action, if not now when, are some of the most popular pieces.
Lois and Eve, can you explain the difference between the traditional Pirkei Avot and your own Pirkei Imahot, and tell us why you felt the need to create this companion volume?
Well, we started to study Pirkei Avot together, congregant and rabbi, and as soon as we talked about that particular topic, Rabbi Eve said to me, how would you like to write Pirkei Imahot, The Wisdom of Mothers? And we were driven to do that because Pirkei Avot, with all its many, many gems of wisdom, was written by men for men in the 2nd century. And obviously we've come a long way, baby. We have a lot of wisdom of our own, and we have a different take on their wisdom. And we felt it was time for contemporary women to respond to their wisdom and add our own and that of others across the country. And Pirkei Imahot was the result.
So, Jessica, your book is a graphic novel. How did creating this art deepen your understanding of the text?
This was a project that took me about 4 years to do. So I've been basically reading the same book with different commentaries for about 4 years. There was definitely also a lot of research involved, which broadened my understanding of the characters, the time they lived in, and the teachings. And making the drawings was kind of like my personal commentary on the text. I tried to not add too much additional text. The idea is that the commentary is in the images, and the overall agenda or message of the commentary is making these teachings feel relevant to people now. Including all different types of people in the book was really important. Having an equal balance of genders represented, ages, and also being able to include people who are close to me in the text also added a deeper understanding to literally draw and make into a sefer. People who are close to me made my connection to this text a lot deeper for sure.
All right, very cool. Here is a question that kind of applies to all of you. How does one go about studying Pirkei Avot, or Pirkei Imahot for that matter? Or how did you?
I'm going to respond to that if I may. This is Lois. I was familiar with Pirkei Avot in bits and snippets, but I never went through the whole thing. And our project began with a study agreement between the two of us to study together and learn from one another. And I'd like to add that we're 45 years apart in age, so this was intergenerational learning at its best. What we did was we took a book, we wrote in the margins, we underlined, and as we took one passage at a time, we talked about it, agreed with it, disagreed with it, made a note that I want to write about that one in our book, or I wouldn't touch this one with a 10-foot pole, or whatever our responses were. And when we finished going through the entire thing, on the very same day we finished, we started again. So over a course of 18 months, we went through the entire book twice. And after the first time, we started writing. And we chose as we went through it which passages we were going to write about. And the learning just deepened and spread and grew as we did it. I did not have the background when I started. And of course, as a Rabbi Posen did. And so it was just a wonderful blending of learning because at my venerable age of 80 years old as of now, I don't have the background and the training, but I have the experience of living. She has the background and training. She's raising young children. I'm raising long-distance grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And it was an absolutely incredible blending for both of us.
My process was collecting about 4 different versions of it from different publishers and different types of commentaries. And I began this project when I was a senior at Parsons. So for my thesis class, my process for a lot of the time was just bringing a backpack full of Svarim, laying them all out on a table, and just simply diving into it. And I guess one of the agendas with the book that I just came out with was also trying to encourage people to feel comfortable with primary sources. As someone who's worked in different Jewish educational spaces, it could sometimes be tricky to throw in the Jewish part in spiritual experiences that are meant to be Jewish. So I think it's important to show people that while these books may seem scary, irrelevant, daunting, they're really within reach. So I would just encourage people to go for the books that they want to learn. And we live in a time where there's so much good Torah also that's available in English. So that's pretty amazing. And yeah, that's a goal of mine for sure.
Okay. So all of you, because you were creating books of your own, are talking about really close study of the text and really deep dives. How would an average person who's not aiming to write a book go about studying Pirkei Avot?
The best thing to do is pick a translation that you read the first line or two, and it makes sense to you. It doesn't feel too archaic or too Old English, and just dive in and start reading it. The beauty of this section of text is that it was really meant to be accessible to everyone. So unlike learning some of the other passages that get really deep into legalese, this is just simply how to live your life. It starts with, and Moses received the tradition at Sinai and passed it on. And I think any person who reads this can understand learning from one another, and that really is what draws you in, is that you're learning from the experiences of other people.
One of the beautiful things about both of our books, I believe, is that they are approachable. And I think either one can be picked up and opened at any page and read a page or two. I don't think that either one of them has to be the kind of book that you sit down and start on page 1 and read all the way through. You could take a passage of it and just study it and think about it and talk about it and put it aside until you pick it up again. And I think that's the beauty of both of these books. And I also think that both of them appeal to people of all ages. My new Bar Bat Mitzvah gift is going to be both of these books together.
I think just the model of the way the Pirkei Imahot book was written is a great example of how people should be learning Torah, and especially if they're new to it, having a study partner is a really amazing thing. And that was only something I started doing towards the end of my book once I started working with an editor, and it makes such a difference.
All right, great advice. Some of the sayings in the Pirkei Avot ring very familiar. To me, it kind of felt like when you read Shakespeare and you come across a phrase that's also the title of a Star Trek episode. You're just like, oh, wait, I've heard that before. One of the really famous ones is the saying by Hillel, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? And when I am for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? So, that's just a really famous saying. Lois and Eve, do you have any favorites in the Pirkei Imahot that you hope will achieve similar status to these famous sayings we were just referring to in the Pirkei Avot?
So one of my favorite pieces is written by Ruth Messenger, who is a global ambassador for American Jewish World Service. And in her piece, she says that we don't have the luxury of being overwhelmed. And she's talking about social justice, and oftentimes people say, there's just too much, I can't do it, I'm too overwhelmed. And she writes this beautiful piece on the fact that we can't use that as an excuse. And if you have that luxury, then you're just not working hard enough. Every time I read that piece from her, it makes me want to go out into the world and try again and re-energize myself and repair the world.
Okay, great. Some of the sayings in the Pirkei Avot seem very strong or harsh, as if maybe the audience were bad listeners. And an example I have in front of me is from chapter 1, Mishnah 13, where it says, those who don't teach deserve death. And so I'm wondering, why did they feel the need to come on so strong? What was going on in society at the time? Or just could you comment on this phenomenon?
Context of the source is really important. It gives a deeper understanding. Something that I think really influenced the harshness that comes across is that they were dealing with the question we still face today. How do we continue the life of the Jewish community? How do we make sure that Torah will be preserved and something that our community and our community's children will care about? And they were also facing a lot of Roman persecution. It was right around the time of the Second Temple destruction. So there was real life danger. And also, once I learned more about the rabbis, you see that they have really intense personalities, but also there's something really, I think, admirable about how important preserving Torah was to them. I think it's important to realize that, when they say death, it's not necessarily a lightning bolt coming down, but it was something that was really that important to them. It really was a matter of life and death.
I agree. I think this was their value statement. And so I agree. They don't mean like lightning bolt come down, you're gone if you don't teach or you don't learn, but that this was what they wanted the next generation to hold on to as Judaism evolved. And they knew that that was going to happen. They knew the temple wasn't there. They knew it wasn't coming back. They knew all of these things were starting to happen and their world was going to be rocked. And so they wanted to put out there really strong statements of belief to ensure the continuity of the tradition.
Okay, thanks. Jessica, you don't add much commentary of your own to your version of Pirkei Avot, but I did want to say that on page 15, you point out the sexism that is now shocking. Let me see. I'm going to find the spot. It's chapter 1, Mishnah 5.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, the wise derive that all who speak too much with women cause trouble for themselves, will be distracted from Torah study, and in the end will inherit Gehinnom, hell. And then in parentheses, you wrote, clearly this passage is shocking. In our society, we now consider men and women to be equally valuable. So in most of your book, you let it just stand for itself, and if it's shocking, the reader will figure that out. But here you felt like you had to comment on it. So can you talk about your decision to do that?
It felt so necessary to share. Yes, this is a part of our heritage. I very much am interested in Jewish renewal and Jewish progressivism. And I think part of that isn't just deleting parts of Torah and history that we don't like, but talking about it and reevaluating where we are now, I think is really important. Yeah, it was a really tough one, and it went through so much editing until I was discussing with my editors, decided, we're going to just simply say that we live in a different world now. Thank God for that. But it felt important to include, though, and somehow create discussion about it.
This is for all of you. How do you envision your book being used by readers?
Lois and I for sure want people to pick it up with a partner and study together. I'm 35, Lois is now 80, so you can do it with anybody. We developed such a deep friendship by our study together. But there are also women who are using it for book groups that are going to meet monthly throughout the year on Rosh Chodesh and study together.
I've been working on developing a teacher's guide for the book. I'm hoping that it will be used in classrooms. I think it could be a really fun and accessible tool for Hebrew school programs or day schools, and coming up with projects to inspire students, young and old, to try to explore what is their expression of Torah. This book is one example of what Pirkei Avot can be, or what creative Torah learning can be. So that's a big part of the teacher's guide, is kind of coming up with prompts for students to make their own mission-inspired works.
I'd like to comment on Jessica's book, because therapists and psychologists claim that one of the most important things one can do to relieve stress is coloring books. And when I read her book, I wanted to have colored pencils because I was drawn to want to color in. Our granddaughter just entered Columbia yesterday in the School of Engineering, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to send her a copy, because she's going to have stress, and let her color on a Jewish source and learn Jewish comfort and knowledge while doing so. And I'm sure that wasn't part of your design when you wrote it, but I think that's a byproduct that has value.
It totally wasn't the intention when I made the book for it to be a coloring book. My life is full of different projects, and one of them is a book that is intended to be a coloring book. This was not that book, though. However, a lot of people at first glance, when they see black and white, initially the brain thinks, I meant to color this in. After thinking about it, I think it's a really nice thing to know that people are spending more time with the book, and if they're coloring it in, they're looking more at the details, the shapes, the letters. I haven't actually seen what it looks like colored in, so I'd be curious to see how your granddaughter enjoys coloring it in.
That's awesome.
Once you come out with a product, you have no control with what the audience does with it. So I guess it's part of the process, letting go of the rules that I had thought I set in mind for people to use it. But no, it's been a really funny, sweet surprise.
Are any of you working on new books? Do you have something in the works?
Not yet, but I'm thinking about it.
Yes.
Lois tells me there's a part 2 coming out. I'm toying with the idea of the Jewish family Bible that you could use from birth through teenage years as the child, but then as a parent come back to.
When I tell them about my book, they usually assume oh, so you're an author, and that always feels kind of strange to me, because I most definitely am not the author of Pirkei Avot. So I've been trying to challenge myself to do some of my own personal writing, what it's like to be a young Jewish woman in 2017, and working on an alphabet book that I'm hoping will be a fun tool also for Hebrew schools. One of my latest interests now is making fun, engaging Hebrew school content, and making a few coloring books about different Jewish holidays. For sure, I wouldn't do another book for a while, but I think that's just what my hands and brain are used to doing.
Is there anything else any of you would like to talk about that I have not thought to ask you?
People are still coming out with Pirkei Avot commentaries. While I was working on it, I think there's also a Yitz Greenberg one that came out, or a Koren one that came out. So I just think it's a really interesting phenomenon to see that making new Pirkei Avot is a trend in Jewish literary world at the moment.
But one thing I'd like to mention, Rabbi Eve and I began to study because she had sent an email blast that said, Rabbi a la carte, come study with me. You choose the topic. And I called and I said, I want to study. And she said, what do you want to study? And I said, well, I don't know. You choose some topics and we'll see what happens. And I think that what's special about it is we didn't know each other well. We knew each other to say Shabbat Shalom when we saw each other in synagogue. And this amazing book is the result, and that wasn't the original intention. I think that's a wonderful thing because synagogues and rabbis and professionals in all fields send up trial balloons. And you never know who's going to respond, and you never know if anything is going to come of it. But in your best intentions, you put it out there to see what will happen. And I think it's pretty amazing that this happened. I'm really proud and grateful.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I just wanted to learn. I had come from the day school world before I came to the synagogue, and I missed teaching every day and learning every day with the students. So I just put it out there, never in a million years expecting to write a book. The joke was I also had a baby last year, so it was what was harder, birthing the book or the baby? Sort of a toss-up at this point. Both of them I'm equally proud of. Maybe the book a little more right now. It lets me sleep a little bit better. And we didn't give up our study time. So Lois and I still meet every other week to talk about their new texts we want to learn and really dive into that intimate relationship of learning together.
And it validates the Hevruta, which is the traditional way of Jewish learning. It's just been for us a wonderful experience.
If listeners want to get a hold of a copy of your books, where can they find them?
You can purchase our book on Amazon and also Barnes & Noble. And you can also go to the website www.wisdomofmothers.com, and there's a link to purchase the book there as well.
And for the illustrated Pirkei Avot, it's currently being sold through my publisher's website. They're called Print O Craft, and their website is a unique one. It's shabb.es, so there's no .com there.
So the website kind of spells Shabbos.
Yeah. Their website does spell Shabbos.
It's an interesting URL.
Yeah, it's endearing.
Cool. Jessica Deutsch, Lois Shenker, Rabbi Eve Posen, thank you so much for speaking with me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having us.
This was really fascinating, and I thought you asked great questions. Thank you.
It was great fun. Thanks so much.
Be sure to listen to our grand finale episode coming up next. And stay subscribed after that for occasional Book of Life episodes and for news about my future podcasting plans. You can find a full archive of past episodes of the Book of Life at bookoflifepodcast.com and also on the Internet Archive at archive.org/details/@TBOL. Stay in touch. We are on social media at facebook.com/bookoflifepodcast and twitter.com/bookoflifepod. You can always email me at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com or leave a voicemail at 561-206-2473. As always, background music is provided by the Freilachmakers Klezmer String Band. Thanks for listening, and happy reading!